For those of you here tonight who have some guilt, I want you to take just a couple of seconds, close your eyes, think about that guilt, focus in on it, and take it over here and just hold it to the side for a second. Okay, lock that in, hold it, and we're going to be coming back to that later tonight. The topic tonight on guilt came from a term paper that I wrote my next to last quarter in college. The actual title was, "What is the significance of a person's religious training in the event they accidentally cause a death?" I wrote that paper when I was 21. It was 45 years ago, and I still can't get it off my mind. Okay. Growing up in this small town of Ackworth, I really wanted to be my own man. I wanted to be my own person. A little problematic, though, because in a small town of about 2,000 people, and your father is the town's family doctor, I was referred to as Dr. Cauble's son. Well, okay, no problem. I graduated from high school, and then off to college I go, and I'm going to be my own man when I get to college, okay? So I go off. My freshman year, I had a lot of fun, in spring quarter especially. So I remember thinking, why would I want to go back to this little small town and, back to 2,000 people, so when I could stay here on campus and party with my buddies and go to school, whatever. So I did. I decided to go back to school, summer school. And then the first day of classes, it's 9 o'clock, and I'm sitting in this intro to psych class or whatever like this, and in walks this girl. And the best way I can describe my first meeting with this girl is like if you ever saw the movie Forrest Gump. And the first day of Forrest Gump goes to school, right? He's on the school bus, and all the kids are giving him shit or whatever, and then he hears this voice like an angel, right? And he looks down, and he just like that, right? He just can't believe the most beautiful, sweetest face he's ever seen. And that's how I felt when I saw this girl, Ellen, okay? And so something inside me said, you got to talk to her. You got to talk to her. Start talking to her. So I did. About a week later, we stayed up to about 3 o'clock in the morning just talking and connected. And then the next night went out, got my first kiss, and that was that, okay? So after that, we were just really inseparable. She got some of her stuff. She had a roommate. I didn't. She moved some stuff over to my room. We stayed together all the time. And what was just so unique about Ellen was that we'd only been together about 4 weeks. And she could just look at me and just know something in my face that something was bothering me, something was worrying me. And she just had this uncanny ability to then say the exact right thing that would make me feel better, okay? And when she did that, she was about as tall as I was. And so I remember I would walk over to her, and I'd lay my head on her shoulder. She'd reach around and pat me on the back. And I just felt like, God, there was nothing I would do for this girl, And it was almost like, too, whereas I wanted to be authentic and go off to school to be my own person, she liked me for who I was, right? Didn't like me because of my family name. Really liked me for who and what I was, okay? And I was just crazy in love with this young lady. One of the cruelest things about life, that's cruel, is that you can fall in love when you're young. In this case, I was 18, she was 19. And as we went into our sophomore year together, and we're still together all the time, there were times when I could tell that she was kind of a little different direction, maybe, something like this. And so at the end of the sophomore year, we were talking, and she said, I'm going to go back to my hometown for the summer, get a job, work, make a little money. I said, okay. I said, I'm going to go back up to the main campus here and go to summer school again. Okay. I knew that wasn't going to be too good, but anyway, about a month later, I got my dear giant phone call. She, just wanted to break up and date other people. Well, okay. So that was when my drinking started, heavy, all right? So then junior year starts. As soon as she gets back to campus, she calls me. She wants to see me again. Okay. So then we got this thing going the whole junior year, where I had an apartment, she was living on campus, and I'd have her come over and she would stay at my apartment for the weekend or whatever. Kind of dating off and on, back and forth and so forth. I kept hoping somehow she would just connect with me again, okay? And so finish up the junior year, go into the senior year, and this time she's moved into her apartment. And I remember her calling me up once or twice a week to come over and stay with her, and I would, and so forth. Well, how about January? She calls me up one night. I go over to her apartment. She's sitting there, and she's crying, and she says, "It's just not fair for me to treat you this way. We have to have a clean break." So, what am I to say? Okay. So I leave, and that's when the drinking really kicked in. I was drinking more and doing other stuff too. But anyway, so that school year ends. I finished my senior year, but I didn't have the grades to graduate. At the business school, they said, you've got 2 more quarters to get your grades up, or you're not going to get a degree here. So I said, okay. So I said, I'll take it's one course, a complicated course. I'll take it during the summer. It was the first week of August when it was Friday afternoon, and I was going through this grocery store. And I stopped my buggy and looked up, and lo and behold, there's Ellen up the counter. And she comes walking down towards me, got her shorts on, tube top, looks great. And we smiles, talks, and so forth. She turns around, walks back up, and there she's with her new boyfriend. I see her kissing. Okay. So something inside me just flips. It's now I know there's not going to be any getting back with her. And the final stake in the coffin is there. So on the way home from the grocery store, I stop off and get a quart of dark rum, didn't have the metric system back then, and a 12-pack of Budweiser. Go back to my apartment. Saturday afternoon, I get a phone call. It's from one of my very best friends. And he says, "George," he says, "I hear you went on a rampage last night." And I vaguely remember going over to the fraternity house and breaking pool cues, knocking pictures off the walls. Some people came out to try to see what was wrong and kind of pushing them and shoving them and being a first-rate asshole. And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Listen," he says, "there's going to be a big party over at this apartment complex near the perimeter." He says, "Come by my house, come by my apartment. I'll drive us over there and drive us back." And I said, "Okay, fine." So Friday night was bad. Saturday night was on steroids. All I remember is at some point they convinced me to put my clothes back on. I compromised. I put my blue jeans on. And when Harold drove me back to the apartment, I remember it was pitch black and dark. And he says, "Hey man," he says, "come on in, sleep on the couch." And I said, I remember looking up at the sky and saying, "Nah man, I got to cruise." I cruised about 1.5 miles. And then I heard this big, loud pow! I opened my eyes, and I was staring into this big, bright, white light. And when I come back for the second half of the show, we will talk at length about guilt. I was lying on an operating room table, staring up into this big light. The doctor was over me, and he was trying to sew pieces of my nose back on while telling me that I was going to need a real good plastic surgeon. A few minutes later, the assistant pulled me off the table. I walked into a hallway. There were 2 EMTs standing there. And I looked at them and I said, they're a few years older than me, I said, "What happened?" And the one on the right stepped up to me and he said, "You took your car 150 feet down the wrong side of a hill and straight into a telephone pole." Then he kind of stepped up a little bit more and he looked at me and he said, "If anybody had been coming up the other side of that hill that night, you would have had it head on and killed them." And I kind of fell back against the wall with my bare feet and no shirt on. Police took me to the police station. I get to call my dad. My dad comes down, gets me out of jail. Go back up to the home house there in Ackworth. I remember walking back into my bedroom. I walked over to my bed, and I grabbed the pillows and I put them up. And I kind of sit up there in bed, leaning back. And I had a concussion, a severe whiplash, and my nose was in several pieces mashed all over my face. And the physical injuries didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was the fact that I could have killed somebody that night. And all I can think of is what kind of person puts their own selfish, self-pity, misery above the safety and rights of innocent people. What kind of person does that? What kind of person drinks so goddamn much? And when he has an accident, he walks into a hallway and says, "What happened?" In other words, you don't even have a fucking clue what happened. What kind of person does that? You know, growing up, I was born in '54, and my father couldn't afford any babysitter in town. He picks this real nice black lady, she's the matriarch of the black community. And Odessa was just as sweet as she could be. Real smart lady, too. I liked her a lot. But back then, I did not go to an integrated school until 7th grade. So society was kind of telling me one thing. And I remember watching the '68 Democratic Convention, and my daily had his police out beating the shit out of all these protesters. My sister is starting to go back for a sophomore year in college. My grandmother's over here. She's like late 60s. So you got the law and order over here. You got the young movement over here. And so I'm seeing a lot of conflict, people. Okay? And I decide that, you know, society may tell me one thing, but I'm going to do what I think's right and wrong. And politically or legally, another thing, I'm going to do what I think's right and wrong. Religion, yeah. But the problem is this: if you decide to create your own code of right and wrong, what do you do when you break that code? And so that's one reason why it was just coming down on me. I remember that just laying there, and I just couldn't, the guilt was just overwhelming. I'm there in my bedroom, and I'm there, I know that I spent 3.5 weeks watching my mother die in a hospital. My first storyteller session, I told a story about the last 38 days of my father's life. After 22 years of marriage, I filed for divorce. Folks, you can add all those up together, and they wouldn't even scratch the surface of what I was going through. I just felt miserable. I just couldn't, and I couldn't get over it. And it's kind of like being submerged somewhere in this big body of guilt, and no matter what you tried to do, you couldn't get out of it. Now, earlier this evening when I first started off, I said, think about that guilt and put it off to the side. Okay. Well, now's when I want you to pull it back in. I want you to think about it as hard as you can. I want you to think about spending 5 weeks. You get up in the morning, get a little breakfast, a little lunch, a little dinner, go to bed that night, and all you do all day long is you think about that guilt day after day after day after day. That's all you do. That's all you think about. Okay? Some of you out there may be saying, well, George, if it was this overwhelming, why didn't you get some help? Well, back in 1976, you just didn't have the therapist on each corner. And it just wasn't that accepted or common a thing to do. And I'm not saying right or wrong here, folks, okay? But back then, my father had raised me to be a self-reliant person. There was just this, neither my mother nor my father even brought up the idea of seeing a therapist. They knew I was suffering. They knew it was hard, okay? And before I forget, I did have one break in that 5 weeks. I went into the hospital to get my nose put back on, okay? And my sister came to see me. She was the only one who came. But anyway, I've spent 5 weeks there, and then it's time to go back to school. Okay. So, and no extra pressure, but I got 2 quarters to get my grades up. Or I get to drive home, tell my father that you just spent 3 years worth of tuition at Emory, and I'm not going to get a degree. No pressure there. So I get back on campus. A really good guy says, hey man, come stay with me. I need a roommate. So fine. And you know how you register for classes in the fall and the spring? And so the courses I'd signed up for that fall were, there was a cinema class, film summer, which I was really looking forward to, really enjoyed. And then there was a Southern literature class, which I really enjoyed a lot. And there was this religion class I'd signed up for, called Death and Dying. It took me about a week and a half to realize, I don't know what kind of irony or whatever you want to call it, coincidence, but this was meant for me. And so I went to my professor and I said, term paper's 50%, whatever. I said, this is what I want to write my paper on. Is this okay? He said, fine. So you might say, well, why? So again, the title was, what is the significance of a person's religious training in the event they accidentally cause a death? Well, growing up, I'd been very, very involved in the Baptist church. I went 4 straight years without missing a Sunday school. 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. I didn't miss a single Sunday school, okay? Didn't miss a day of school either. 12, I was baptized, so I had all this. So I thought maybe it's the religion. Looking back, it wasn't so much the religion as it was I violated my own code of right and wrong. Because when you violate that code of wrong, you have to step up and do something. You can't just ignore it. It's like you got to back your mouth up. You know, it's really meaningful. So anyway, I'm planning on writing this paper, and it becomes an obsession to me. And I am spending all this time on it. I want to give you an idea of what I did. I went to libraries and I visited and talked to people at the departments of both psychology and theology. I went to 2 separate hospitals to talk to people there, Kennestone and Northside hospitals. I went to the Georgia Mental Health Institute. I went to Peachtree Parkwood Mental Health. I went to Brawner's Hospital, which was the big psych hospital back then. I went to a psychiatrist on retainer for Cobb County. I went to 7 different public county mental health centers all over the place. I had a real good experience at Douglas County. And then I went and had a chat with the chaplain for Grady Hospital, the big public hospital in Atlanta. And these stories that I was getting back from these people, and I included them in my paper, but some of these were just plain out gruesome. I mean, there's no other word. They were tough. Okay. Anyway, toward the end of the quarter, and I turned in my paper, and I got it back, and Alex, I got an A on it. A minus, but I'm not guilty about saying an A. But I started feeling a little better, Thought it wasn't anything sudden. It was just this gradual work that you keep doing, and you keep doing, and you keep working harder and harder to overcome. And eventually I kind of sort of bottomed out, turned the corner, and started feeling somewhat human again. After about 4 months, and I hadn't been drinking any at all, I started feeling like maybe I got a chance at this, okay? And so I went to this one library. Back then, they wouldn't let the undergraduates go to the graduate school of theology, so I'd have a friend give me books, and I did that. But I went to this one library at a psychiatric hospital. And I went, and they let me in. I go and I find the books I want. I get them all. I walk back to this table, put them down, put my notebook down, take the books, and I start reading. Read. Spend the whole afternoon there, making notes and things. And there was this, all of a sudden, boom, I read this one passage. I think, man, that's pretty damn good. I'd like to read it to you tonight. And before I close out tonight, read this passage, close out tonight, I do want to thank Dr. Rubens, Julia Rubens, where is she? Yeah, right there, for her helping me with my story tonight. And also want to thank a lady named Shannon Turner, who works with storyviews.net. She helped me quite a bit with this too. So anyway, here's the passage that y'all remember doing that, right? Y'all went and got books and sat down and read them. Ask your grandparents about it. Anyway, the passage came from a book, Guilt, Theory, and Therapy by Edward Stein. Guilt is the peg on which the meaning of man hangs. It is also the peg on which man too often hangs himself. Folks, the last thing we need is some good people hanging themselves over a mistake. Good night.